Hello BookTube. Today I am talking about Racso and the Rats of NIMH by Jane Leslie Conley. This book is a sequel to Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. So let's talk briefly about Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH first. Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH is better known for the animated movie The Secret of NIMH, which was made by Don Bluth and came out in 1982. And for people of my generation, children of the 80s, it is a very well-known movie. I'm not sure if kids still watch it nowadays. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Do the kids still watch it nowadays? But it was a very well-known movie when I was a kid. Yeah, it was originally a book, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, published in 1971 by Robert C. O'Brien. This is the sequel, which is not by the same author. Robert C. O'Brien unfortunately died, I forget when, but sometime before the publication of this book. So after he died, his daughter, Jane Leslie Conley, started writing the sequels. She wrote 2 sequels. This is the first one. The second one we'll talk about another day. But yeah, my history with these books. So like I said, I was a big fan of the animated movie as a kid. I read Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH in 5th grade. I read it as part of a class reading project. We had a teacher who read through the book with us. And I really enjoyed reading Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. I thought it would be boring because I thought I already knew the story from the animated movie. But the book goes into way more detail about the rats and their lives than the movie did, and I just totally got fascinated by this world of these rats and their underground technological lair. After we finished reading that, I got Racso and the Rats of NIMH out of my school library and read this on my own. Now, I actually didn't remember anything about this book other than the fact that I had read it and that I had enjoyed it. I remember checking this out of the library as a 5th grader and wondering, is this going to be any good? And then totally getting hooked on it, getting involved in the story, finding the style of the book very easy and pleasurable to read as far as the prose style. And those are the memories I had of it. I didn't actually remember anything about the plot of it. And I had wondered when I was rereading it now, if, once I started reading it, some of it would start to come back to me as it sometimes does. But no, none of it came back to me. So this is a reread, but it was like reading it for the first time. Now, the original book, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, I actually reviewed on this channel about 5 years ago. Seems like it was just the other day, but yeah, time flies. It was almost 5 years ago now. I was living in Vietnam at the time, and I was actually using it for my own classes. I was teaching English as a second language. And with some of the advanced classes, I tried to get them to read Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH with mixed results. They didn't like it as much as I did when I was a kid, but that's a story for another time. And I was able to obtain the copy from an online resource. But at the time, I did not have access to Racso and the Rats of NIMH. So I didn't continue with it at the time. I had to wait until I'm back here in the United States, and I have access to this book now because of interlibrary loan. I ordered it up from my local library. So that's all my background with it. Let's get into the book itself. And I will be giving away spoilers for both the original book, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, and some of the plot points with Racso and the Rats of NIMH. So, yes, okay. let me start in general terms. I mentioned as a fifth grader, I found this book quite pleasant and easy to read in terms of prose style. And coming back to it, I found that style was much as I remembered it. It's pleasant and easy to read. It's a good writer, Jane Leslie Conley, and in a writing style that I think is reminiscent of her father. Now, keep in mind, it was almost 5 years ago that I reread Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, but as far as I remember, writing style seems quite similar. Maybe this book is written in a somewhat simpler style, but a similar style. The book makes some choices in terms of plot, which how do I want to say this? Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, the original book, deliberately left a lot of stuff ambiguous. This book takes a lot of those things that have been left ambiguous and makes them concrete. And in particular, I'm talking about the fate of Jinner and the fate of Justin. At the end of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, we were not sure if those two rats were alive or dead, but their fates get resolved in this book. It was interesting. I commented about this in my review of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. This interesting narrative choice Robert O'Brien had, where he deliberately left a lot of stuff ambiguous in his book. I'm not sure I agreed with the choice, but it was definitely a choice he was making. It was so much stuff was left ambiguous that you just had to say, okay, he is deliberately making a narrative choice to leave all this stuff ambiguous. So it would be interesting if, we could bring him back from the dead, what he would think about his daughter resolving those plot threads that he had left ambiguous and going ahead and saying, no, actually, this is what happened. It was something that I was a little bit on the fence on at first, but then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, if you're going to write a sequel, you just have to decide what happened, right? You can't leave stuff ambiguous and then continue the story. If you're going to continue the story, you need to say, okay, we're going to make a decision on what happened. This is what happened. It is, in all other respects, a very loving and appropriate sequel to the original Rats of NIMH book. So there, almost all the characters in the original Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH make a reappearance here, including the minor characters. Rats who are mentioned only very briefly in the original Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH are brought back here. So the author, the daughter, is obviously very familiar with the original work, very familiar with all the characters in the original work, brings them all back. The characterization here is good. Mrs. Frisby and Jeremy the Crow and all the original characters, when they come back, are, for my money, exactly as you would imagine them, are completely in line with their portrayal in the original novel. So that part works out quite well. The plot of the original book, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, was a lot tighter in some ways, even though it did have a meandering backstory that took out about half of the book. The forward plot, at least, was tightly focused on Mrs. Frisby, and she was the point of view character through which we saw the world. This book is a little bit less tightly focused. It starts out focusing on Mrs. Frisby again. Then the perspective shifts to her son Timothy. But then, as you can see, this book is titled Racso. So Racso enters the story and then he takes over. There are many points throughout the book where we shift and just go to the perspective of minor characters for like only a couple pages. It's a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Disjointed that way, or it feels a little bit confusing at points that way, jumping the point of view. But obviously what she's doing is placing much more emphasis here on the collective of the Rats of NIMH than any single character. So yes, Racso is one of the big characters in here, and obviously the book is named after him. But he is not the only point of view character, and to some extent the book is almost as much Timothy Frisby's book as it is Racso. So, Racso. Racso, we find out, is the son of Jinner. Now, Jinner, if you remember the cartoon movie, Jinner was the villain of that movie. But Jinner in the books is different than Jinner in the animated movie. In the animated movie, Jinner was like a classic evil cartoon villain. In the books, he wasn't evil. He was portrayed as being short-sighted and pig-headed. He was not a good character in the book, and he was not, in my opinion, a fully developed character in the book. At least that was my opinion coming back and rereading it a few years ago. But he was not the villain that they made him out to be in the movie. We find out in this book that Jinner had survived the electrocution accident that they were presumed dead in. So again, in the book, and this is one of the places where the book is different from the movie, Jinner and his followers leave the rest of the rats. They're going to embark on a plan to continue to steal electricity from the humans, which is the ideological divide that is dividing the rats, whether to stay and keep stealing the electricity or whether to strike out on their own. Jinner and his followers want to keep stealing the electricity. There's 7 groups of them. Later it's reported that 6 or 7 rats were found electrocuted in what looks like trying to steal electricity from a car engine. And again, like I said, it's deliberately left ambiguous in the book. It's left ambiguous whether or not these were really Jinner's rats, Jinner and his rats. And it's also, I went back and checked this, and this was a detail I'd forgotten about, but it is deliberately made ambiguous whether there were 6 rats or 7 rats. We get kind of both numbers floated about, and there's some discussion about which is the true number, and then the story just moves on. So obviously, the door is left open for Jinner to still be alive. And that's what happens in this book. We find out that Jinner has survived that accident. He's gone back to the city, scarred and afraid of everything, and a shell of his former self, apparently. But he has a family in the city, and his son Racso is one of them. But Racso wants to learn to read and write. He wants to be like the other rats. So he runs away from home to go to Thorn Valley. Thorn Valley is where the rats set up their home after the events of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, where they leave the farm. But there's a problem. There's a dam that's going to be set in Thorn Valley, which is going to flood the valley and destroy the rats' new home. So they have to find a way to sabotage the dam project. And they find a way by a method that involves going into the computers and altering the computer program. So the rats have to teach themselves how to work computers. Now, this is a little bit of a stretch, in my opinion, and yes, the actual technicalities of how the rats learn to work computers are a little bit brushed over, but I think it can work maybe because there's a passage in the original Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH where it suggested that the experiments that these rats were subjected to not only gave them human intelligence, but superhuman intelligence, making them smarter than humans. So if we go with that, then actually maybe that they can very quickly learn themselves how to use computers and how to computer program. Maybe that works. The whole plot about the dam and the rats sabotaging the computers and stuff like that is a little bit cheesy. And part of me wants to say it's kind of a stereotypical 80s plant. Sorry, stereotypical 80s plot. Like there's this evil developer and he's going to sabotage nature, and the conservationists have to try and rescue nature from this evil developer. And in fact, there's even this is something that's really. Let me see if I can find it. There's the owl. And the owl, another character from the first book who makes a reappearance. The owl has to hunt mice because he has to live. So that obviously creates a danger to the mice and the rats. But yeah, here's a little excerpt from the dialogue with the owl. The owl says, "I kill mice because I have to eat," the owl said. "There was a reason. With men, it often seems there is no reason at all." "Money," Mrs. Frisby said softly. She felt numb. "I have heard it said that men do what they do for pieces of paper called money." Okay, so I don't know. Is that kind of calling out man as the most dangerous, corrupt animal who destroys the environment for no reason at all? Is that rather uniquely 80s, or is it something that we still do today? I kind of feel like it's got a little bit of an 80s tinge to it, but let me know what you think. Anyways, where was I going with this? Yeah, there's... oh, right. The other thing, talking about the intelligence of the rats, something I said in my review of the original Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH was that the rules of this world were a little bit ambiguous in the first book. So the rats have super intelligence, which makes them different from ordinary rats. But it's a little bit unclear what really the rules of this animal world are, because all the animals in these books seem intelligent. They all are much more observant and than normal animals, much able to plan and communicate and have society than would strictly be true of normal animals. So it already is a talking intelligent animal story, which kind of spoils the idea of the rats being made super intelligent. And the whole rules of who could talk to who and what language they were speaking, it was all a little bit strange in the original book, if you tried to think about it too closely. These are things that I don't think I noticed too much as a fifth grader, but certainly noticed it as an adult coming back to this book. All those problems and awkwardnesses are in the sequel as well. I guess this is a problem that was inherited from the original book. So, yeah, something to be aware of. It's a little bit awkward, but if you could get past it in the first book, you could get past it in the second book. Another difference between this and the first book, they're both written for children, but the first book was one of those children's books that treated children as young adults. So like it was a children's book, but it was mostly about adults, and when I say adults here, I mean adult animals doing adult stuff. So you know, the Rats of NIMH and Mrs. Frisby, and the children were there in the background. Timothy being sick, of course, was one of the main plot drivers of the original book, but they weren't the main point of view characters. In this book, the children take much more center stage, and as a result, the plot of the book becomes a bit more childish. So, for example, Racso, the main character, one of the main characters in this book, has to learn how to take turns on the slide when he goes to the playground. So we get like a couple pages devoted to that. He really wants to keep going down the slide, but he needs to be taught that other children need to take their own turns. And these kind of childlike lessons about controlling your emotions and taking turns are much more predominant in this book than they were in the previous book. I mean, in the previous book, I don't think they were there at all. So in that respect, the previous book, it was possible to read it and kind of forget it was a children's book. This book, not so much. I mean, you can definitely read it as an adult and still enjoy it, and the prose is, like I said, quite good. But you are kind of constantly reminded you're reading a children's book with this one. But there is an interesting angle here, which I think is more pronounced in the original book than in the original book, excuse me, about the Rats of NIMH society being kind of like a model democratic society. So Racso comes in and he wants to be a hero and he wants everyone to respect him. And Nicodemus, the wise old rat from the previous book, who's still kind of the de facto leader of the rat colony, talks to Racso and he said, we actually are not in the business of raising heroes here. He says, heroes are born of adversity, you know, crisis, fires, dangers, wars. And he says, our goal is to create a society where we don't have this adversity. And Racso says, well, but you'll need leaders. And Nicodemus says, yes, but what is a leader? He says, you know, a leader is somebody who does more than his share of work. A leader is somebody who pitches in and does what needs to be done without complaining about it. So, you know, the idea of leader not being some totalitarian, but a leader is kind of the somebody who puts himself at the forefront of community projects. And I, you know, even though it's a children's book, I read that and I thought, yeah, that's good. You know, maybe the problem with a lot of society is that everybody wants to be number one and everyone wants to be the hero and the leader, instead of, you know, thinking, how can I just chip in and contribute to society a bit? Now, the thought also occurs to me, I lived in Japan for several years. I think in Asian societies, maybe the emphasis on the communal good is more pronounced than it is in the Western societies. But, okay, as a tangent we don't need to go down. Back to the book. There's also some descriptions about the rats' democratic process. So they're going to the meeting to discuss their options. And Racso, being the new one to the group, says, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to vote on it? And one of the other rats says, well, we vote on things when we need to. But usually we just talk things through and just arrive at a decision. And then the idea of, I believe it's called consensus democracy, where you get a group, you just kind of talk things through until everyone agrees on the right thing to do, instead of saying, right, we're going to have a vote, majority wins, minority loses, where there's always kind of winners and losers in a democracy. Instead of you have more of a consensus model. Now, this is obviously, this wouldn't work on a national scale, I don't think. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. But this is a model of a democratic process that I've seen before advocated or utilized in activist groups before. This is how they favor making their decisions. Yeah, that element of it struck me as interesting food for thought about the role of community and leaders and heroes and democratic processes and all that. Even though the ending of the book does walk it a little bit back. So at the ending of the book, Nicodemus says, well, I still stand by what I said before, but maybe heroes are a little bit necessary. And Nicodemus says that, of course, because as you can imagine, there's some rats who show themselves to be heroes at the end of this book without giving those plot points away exactly. So, yeah. I know I spoiled a lot of this book, but if I haven't completely spoiled it for you, it's worth checking out. I mean, read Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH first. If you haven't already read it, it's different enough from the movie that it's worth reading, even if you've seen the movie. And then why not continue on to this one? It has its strengths and weaknesses, but it's a very quick read. Finished it off in a couple days. Well, you know, it's a kid's book, so what do you expect? But worth the read.